and then I'll just pull up the screen reader during the PC demos.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Thank you all for coming. So this is Dev ICT for Thursday, March 30th. A little bit about us. So Dev ICT is a program ran by members of Make ICT. If you're not familiar with them, you should check them out, makeict.org. We are a community for software developers, all kinds of developers. Our mission is to educate, empower, and connect developers in the Wichita area. We have a code of conduct that we take very seriously. We want everyone to feel safe and welcome at one of our events and in our space. If you have any problems or feel any issues, please feel free to come to me. There's more about our code of conduct online at devict.org. I just want to cover a few ways real quick that you can get involved. The best way is to chat daily on Slack, which I think we may hear today about some accessibility issues on Slack.
I hadn't thought about that, but
okay. I have a feeling there are some. You don't have to cover that if you don't want to. I just had a feeling that's where it was going to go. I was looking through the slides. But so Slack is our chat community. There's people on there all the time, usually not even talking about programming, just talking about whatever. If you go to devict.org, you can get an invite to join. You can also, from that website, you can watch past presentations. We're recording this one, and we try to record as many as we can and put them up there. Another way to be involved is to donate. Membership in our organization is free, and our events are almost always free. But we do have some monthly costs, which is like $100 a month. Right now, we're getting recurring monthly donations just a little bit above that, $106. So we're in the black finally, which is great. But more donations would help, especially to kind of spread risk around. Like I know there's one guy donating $25 a month right now. So whenever he decides to stop doing that, we'll be in the red again. So even just like $5, something like that's great. There's more on our website about how to provide that kind of support. Another way to be involved is to give a talk. We're usually looking for people that want to give a talk. I think we're actually going to have a lightning talk event here in the next couple of months, probably. Looking for a lot of people to give like short 5-minute presentations about something related to software. Practice for a presentation at like a professional or regional conference, or just something that you want to learn about. We also have a mentorship program. Let me go back. There we go. If you want to volunteer as a mentor, just let me know and I can give you instructions on how to get listed on our mentor list. Or if you're looking to connect with a mentor, go to devict.org/mentors and look through the list of volunteers. Quick shout outs to some of our friends. As I mentioned, Make ICT, Wichita's maker community. Go check them out, makeict.org. There's Women Who Code. There's Open Wichita. WULUG is the Wichita State Linux Users Group. You don't have to be a Wichita State student to attend. Startup Wichita, Shopper Startup are both two entrepreneurial-based, I can never say that word, entrepreneurial-based groups. Wichitox is a quarterly event that it's kind of like a Ignite or TEDx kind of style event where they get a bunch of people together to talk about things that are important to them. Quick rundown of our upcoming events. We have an event every Monday night here at the Labor Party called Study Hall. And the idea is it's a time and place where you can come and just work on whatever you're working on with people around. You can ask questions. So it's just kind of, you know, think about like the library or something, like going like after school, a place to go and study and work on stuff. There's also Code and Coffee, which is basically the same thing, but it's in the morning. That's every Thursday morning. On the second Saturday of the month, we have a game dev potluck here at the Labor Party. So that starts at 10 a.m. and it goes pretty much all day. It's just come and make games or play games or just hang out and chat. It's a potluck style event, so bring food if you want. We also try to do a social event called the Hangout. So I think the next one would be April 11th. We're still looking into scheduling that one. And then for our presentation style events, we have on the third Tuesday of the month, we have Java Talks. And that one's hosted at High Touch, not the Labor Party. So get together and every month they talk about something in the JVM ecosystem. On the fourth Tuesday of the month, they have here at the Labor Party, we have .NET Night. So right now they're walking through I think they're doing like a multi-month walkthrough of building a like movie database API web app kind of thing. So that's all .NET, so C# or ASP.NET or VB, something like that. And then on the last Thursday of the month, we do this event, which we call DevICT Presents. So this is typically a member of DevICT, sometimes a volunteer from outside of our community, will come and give a presentation on just something related to software development. So that leads into tonight's event. I'm really excited to hear about this. This is an area that I know that I need to learn more about. I have some ideas, but I don't really know. So tonight we have Matthew Campbell is going to be giving us a talk on accessibility for blind and visually impaired users. So Matthew, let me close this, switch over to IE, and you take it away.
Thanks. Good evening. So who am I? I'm a visually impaired software developer. I've been working in the field of accessibility for, about 15 years now. And, 15 years full-time. And among other things, so I work for a small software company called Serotech. That's SEROTEK.com. I should have put that on the slide. Sorry. Among other things, I have developed a screen reader for Windows, which I will be using during the PC demos tonight. So speaking of screen readers, how do blind and visually impaired people use computers and mobile devices anyway? So a screen reader is a program that reads the screen out loud through speech synthesis, or it can present on the screen through a refreshable Braille display. And a Braille display is a device that has usually just one row of Braille cells, and they use little pins that move up and down to change which dots are currently raised. So those are expensive. So and I don't actually own any. I have a few on loan for testing purposes, but I decided not to bring any tonight because, well, for starters, you would each have to come up and feel it. So, so we'll be sticking to speech synthesis. There's also screen magnification, where basically a portion of the screen can be displayed magnified by some amount by a separate program. I mean, of course, you can always increase the font size within a program if the program supports it, like web browsers that tend to support page zoom, and I use that a lot. But I only occasionally use like full screen magnification, and that gets into how I use computers and what my own visual impairment is. So I have enough sight that I can read a screen if I get up close to it, like with my laptop right now. If I lean over and look at the screen, the headings on these slides are enough that I can read them without much difficulty. And I also have like my command prompt and SSH terminal windows configured to where it's basically an 80 by 24 or 80 by 25 terminal taking up most, if not all, of the screen. And when I'm in my office, home office, with my laptop hooked up to a monitor and keyboard, I can read that with up close with only moderate discomfort. But for like browsing the web and reading email and basically reading any extended passage of just regular prose text, usually not for code, I will fire up a screen reader and do it that way. So demos, let me show you. So what do you want to see first, the PC or the iPhone? PC. All right. Come on. Oh, don't tell me this shortcut key doesn't work while it's in full screen mode. Okay, let's try this then. There we go. This is unrehearsed. Okay, can you all follow that, or do I need to slow it down?
Slow down.
Okay,
Slow
yeah.
down first, please.
Okay, sure.
I think I got this.
Wait.
Yeah.
I'm not at all practiced on using this laptop as a laptop, so. How's that?
Perfect. That's perfect.
Okay, so let's see, where are we again? And so, so let me back up again and explain a little about what I just did. So one of the interesting things about screen readers, particularly on Windows, is because we depend on the keyboard so much, and because applications tend to have keyboard commands of their own, we have to stay out of their way. And so the way that we do that, oh, that's a bug. I should fix that. It shouldn't speak that when it's not in focus. So the way that we tend to avoid conflicting with application-defined keyboard commands is we will use an unusual, rarely used key on the keyboard, such as caps lock or insert or scroll lock as a modifier key. And the one that's most readily available on both desktop and laptop keyboards is caps lock. So I will often use the caps lock key as a modifier key when issuing screen reader commands. So reacquaint myself with where I'm at now that I slowed down the speech. By the way, this part is totally unscripted. I'm just doing this spontaneously. To reacquaint myself with where I'm at now that I slowed down the speech, I'm going to hold down the caps lock key and press T for title.
Desktop, normal size.
And that normal size doesn't really make sense there because desktop isn't really a window. But so note to self, I should fix that. So now I'm going to hold down the caps lock key and press up arrow, which is kind of our say the current thing command. In a multi-line edit field, this would say the current line, but in most contexts, it just says whatever has the keyboard focus, and I will get back to that later.
This easy, not selected. 1 of 3.
Okay, so that's a list item, and it's not selected, so I could press, we screen reader users tend to be very familiar with the more obscure Windows keyboard commands, so I could press Control Space to select that item.
This easy, 1 of 3.
And then I can just down arrow.
Recycle pin, 2 of 3. System access, 3 of 3. Location.
System access is the name of our screen reader. Not a very original name, I know, but that's what it ended up being. And those little things that you heard after the popping sound were tooltips that popped up when the list items were selected. So now I'm going to go into the Start menu.
Cortana, search box, editable text, blank.
And let's see. I could just down arrow here a little bit.
Start, toggle navigation menu, apps new, list, recently added group. Start with list. Google Chrome, start with group. And
you can hear that it says, it's saying things like start of list, start of group after a slight delay. That's one of the unique features of our screen reader, whereas others tend to have lots of keyboard commands to read different things. We'll just read whatever we think might be useful with a little delay to give the user a chance to shut it up if they want to. But enough messing around in there. I'm thinking the most interesting thing to demonstrate here would be web browsing.
HTTP.
Did I not give that thing a title tag? Okay, so let's just open a new tab.
Address and search using pin, editable text, HTTP,
and let's see. I'll go. Yeah, sure.
List closed. Heading, who we are. We are a group of individuals who have a common interest in web and software.
Now, let's see. Did you use an ARIA landmark? No, but one of the nice things about our screen reader, about my screen reader that I wrote, is, although my boss takes credit for most feature ideas, is that it will, when you load a page, it will search for the first block of text that's longer, that's at least like 70 characters long, and it'll assume that that's where you want to start reading. So But let me just, because I don't remember where the home key is on this keyboard, I'm just going to up arrow to the top of the page.
Start with page.
There we go. And by longstanding convention, the first thing that let me back up and explain a little bit what I just did there. Or I can come back to that when I get to that slide. Let me just have it start reading down the page.
Support, events, videos, mentors, jobs, chat, contact, edit, who we are.
That's one of my pet features right there, the little tones for links, because most screen readers will just say the word link when they get to a link. And if you're reading through text that has inline links in the middle of the text, that can be kind of distracting, whereas the tone kind of serves the same auditory feature that an underline. I know that underlines are out of fashion. That one of those things would serve visually, so it can indicate that it's a link without breaking the flow. And you didn't really get that in the navigation bar, but let me just go. Let's read our lovely code of conduct.
Code of conduct, not dedicated tag. Code of conduct, edit and anti-harassment policy. Dedic is dedicated to providing a safe and harassment-free experience for everyone, regardless of gender, gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, disability, physical appearance, body size, race, age, religion, technical ability, or software preferences. We do not tolerate harassment in any form. Sexual language and imagery is not appropriate for any Dedic meeting or chat room.
Was that it, or
No,
no?
there's more.
Okay, well, you can get the full version on the website. I probably need to keep moving along. So, okay, I think that's probably enough for an initial demo on the PC.
Shutting down system access.
Sure.
So where we have words like dev ICT, is there a way to indicate to the screen reader how to pronounce an unusual word like that?
Unfortunately, no, there is no current standard for that. So we screen reader developers have to just kind of maintain our own exception. And this is a feature that my boss and I have never gotten around to, but most other screen readers have a user configurable pronunciation dictionary. But we just kind of maintain our own hard-coded substitutions as we find things that annoy us enough to fix. So let me just back out of there. It looks like I'm back in my slides. So let me demo. Let me just do a quick demo with the iPhone as well.
7:27 p.m.
Okay, and so a screen reader on a mobile device like the iPhone or Android will override. Oh, and it already locked again. So a screen reader on a mobile device will override all the touch screen gestures. So
7:27 p.m.
I'm just going to swipe through the screen here, and this is the lock screen. So now let me just get to the home screen first. I'll have more interesting stuff to swipe through.
Messages. 44 unread messages.
Yeah, I tend not to mark text messages as read after I've read them in the notifications.
Calendar. Thursday, March 30th. Photos. Camera.
Let me get to the next page where the interesting stuff is on my home screen.
Page 3 of 4. FaceTime. Calculator. Podcasts. Extras folder.
So is it reading out the first item on each of
Double
those
tap
pages?
open. Actions available.
No, what? Okay, so what I'm doing, and let me just turn the screen to face you guys. Sorry, recording watchers, you're going to be totally blind here, but at least I can show the screen to the live audience from time to time. So what's happening is I swipe through the screen, and each time I swipe right, it reads the next thing on the screen. So I believe it goes in like spatial order from left to right, top to bottom. At least it does in most cases. There are some applications where the reading order might be kind of weird. So let me unlock it again. And I'm just going, this is totally unscripted. I'm going to go into Spotify and search for a song.
Calculator. Podcasts. Extras folder. Shazam. Find my friends. Find my iPhone. Messenger. Spotify. Double tap. Double tap open.
Oh, how are we doing time-wise?
So we have plenty of time.
Okay.
Selected. Home. Tab.
It didn't
Modify.
read much of anything. I just kind of guessed when.
Browse. Tab. Search. Tab. Read. 7:29 p.m. Status
Oh.
bar item.
Looks like I tapped a
Swipe down. Alarm set.
little too
Status.
high.
Search. Search field.
Oh, if you single tap on at a location on the screen, it'll read whatever element is under your finger, and then you double tap to activate, which is what I'm going to do now here on the search field. Let me just let you guys see the screen quickly. So,
Calling narrator.
oh, come on.
Actions available. Search. Search field. Search field. Designated. Dictate.
Now,
Double tap to start.
because we are a group
Double tap to
of
finish.
geeks, Jonathan Colton, Code Monkey.
Insert Jonathan Colton Code Monkey.
Okay, and
Clear text. Button. Cancel. Button. Top result. Heading. Code Monkey. Sum. Jonathan Colton. Joppo looks back. Button.
I'm going to double tap that.
Code Monkey. Sum. Jonathan
Code
Colton.
monkey, get up,
Search
get
field.
coffee.
Double tap.
Code monkey, go to job.
Now, it was supposed to turn down the music while it was talking, but VoiceOver, the screen reader, has some kind of bug.
Top result.
Now it's turning it down.
Code Monkey. Sum. Jonathan
We call that audio ducking when it turns down. Let me stop it.
Button. FaceTime. Double tap open.
And that's my first iPhone demo. So, and if I had played music on the PC, you would have heard that my screen reader on the PC does audio ducking too, as do, actually, I think all of the major ones do now. So as of Windows 8. So, all right. So how did that work? We're developers here, so let's get into at least an overview of how all of that worked. So every major platform has an accessibility API, which allows screen readers and other assistive technologies to find out what's on the screen and interact with it. On Windows, we have a few of them. The original one, going back to like 1996, was Microsoft Active Accessibility. It had enough in there to make like basic dialog boxes accessible. Like I think the thing that really prompted it was all of the dialog boxes in the Microsoft Office applications, because they looked like Windows dialogues, but they weren't native controls. They used like a cross-platform library that Microsoft had between Mac and Windows. So they needed to, they couldn't just, before accessibility APIs, Windows screen readers would look at the Win32 window handles and window classes and other stuff like that for native controls to figure out what they were. So Microsoft needed a way that would work regardless of how the controls were implemented. So now these days on Windows, the current Microsoft blessed accessibility API is called UI Automation. There's also one called iAccessible2, which is a third-party unofficial extension of active accessibility. It's used by Mozilla, Firefox, and Google Chrome, and a handful of other applications. On Mac, we have, well, on Mac and iPhone, we have an Apple accessibility API that's part of Cocoa or Cocoa Touch. On Android, there's a Java one. On Linux, there's ATK, I think, is part of GNOME. And on the web, there is Accessible Rich Internet Applications, or ARIA, which I'll be talking more about later. So what do these APIs consist of? So there's a tree of elements. So it's kind of similar to the DOM in a web page, or even in any major native GUI toolkit. You've got a top level container such as a window, and then you've got other containers such as panels or just views, as they're called on Mac and iOS. And then you've got the elements themselves, such as buttons or checkboxes or text fields. And that same tree structure is reflected in the accessibility API. And each element in that tree has various properties, such as the name of the element, its role or control type, such as button, checkbox, static text, which is just like regular text that serves as a label or a prompt, editable text, list view, slider, things of that sort. And then there are various flags, such as whether the element has the keyboard focus, if that's applicable on the platform. In the case of a checkbox, whether it's checked. In the case of a list item or tab, whether it's selected, things like that. And then for text fields or multi-line edit controls, you've got the value, which is the text in the control. And then one of the things where the original Microsoft Active Accessibility really fell short was that they gave you the full text that was in the edit control, but they didn't break it down on a line-by-line basis and give the screen reader a way to find out what was on the current line of text as opposed to the control as a whole, or where the cursor was, which text was selected, anything like that. So we had to fall back to, again, Win32 window messages or like the Microsoft Word Visual Basic for Applications object model, because that was the only thing they provided that gave us the information we needed. We had to fall back to other things for anything more complicated than a single line edit control in a dialog. So that's properties. And then events. That would be things like on the PC when a new element receives the keyboard focus because you moved to something else, like when I was down arrowing through things in the list box on the desktop, or when I brought up the start menu with the search box. The system would fire an event when the search box got the focus, and so the screen reader would know that something new was active and it should read that. So focus is a big event on the PC. Another thing would be basically when any of those properties that I mentioned earlier changes. So like if the element's name changed, or if it wasn't selected and now it is, or vice versa, it'd fire an event for that. So that the screen reader hopefully doesn't have to do polling and busy waiting to find out when things happen. Although sometimes we still do have to, like if the user presses a keystroke and we know that we expect that something interesting is going to happen, like they've hit down arrow in an edit box and we expect that it moved to a new line of text and we need to read that line. In some cases, we still have to set a timer and find out, did the current line of text change? But ideally, we just wait for the appropriate event to fire. So on Windows, and I believe on Linux with GNOME as well, we use the keyboard focus as, so the current active control is whatever has the keyboard focus. So whereas on Mac or iPhone, the screen reader sort of has its own virtual cursor that moves through the screen. And I don't have a Mac here, but in the VoiceOver screen reader on the Mac, as on the iPhone, if you have if you have a trackpad on your Mac, you can swipe. You can do swipe gestures on there, and it's similar to doing it on the iPhone. Or you can do Control Option left or right arrow to do the equivalent on the keyboard and move through the screen that way. But on Windows, we generally use things like Tab and Shift Tab and the arrow keys, just standard keyboard commands that are handled by the operating system or the application to move through the user interface. The main exception being web browsing. And I alluded to this during my demo, but I decided not to discuss it until I got back to the slides. What I was doing there on the DevICT homepage when I was doing up arrow, up arrow, up arrow to go back to the top of the page and read it from the top, I was moving a virtual cursor. So the screen reader has its own internal representation of the page where we traverse the DOM and we basically divide the page into virtual lines so that we can then use up and down arrow to move through the page. And each link or other interactive element, such as a button or a form field, gets its own virtual line in our representation of the page. So we can take what is visually a two-dimensional presentation, and internally, of course, it's a hierarchy, a tree, and we give the user a linear representation of it. And on the, I believe that Orca on Linux does basically the same thing, and that VoiceOver on the Mac has a mode where you can browse the page that way. But on mobile devices like iPhone and Android, they don't really treat a web page any differently than a native interface. So it's just swiping through the screen there like you would anywhere else. So, oh, right. ARIA, Accessible Rich Internet Applications. So web development, of course, has come a long way since when all we had were the handful of HTML form controls. And you've got JavaScript frameworks implementing all sorts of widgets, and how are those made accessible? So all those properties that I was talking about earlier in the context of accessibility APIs, label, role, flags, all those things, they basically all have corresponding HTML attributes, most of them prefixed with ARIA dash whatever. So ARIA checked to indicate whether a checkbox is checked or not. The role property indicates whether something is a button or a checkbox or a tab or a slider, etc. So how can accessibility go wrong? Aside from the little bugs in my screen reader that I noted in passing, the things that I've demoed so far all worked. So the real showstopper is when an application implements its user interface using non-native controls and it doesn't implement the platform's accessibility API. For example, and this is my favorite example of an inaccessible iPhone application, because back in the 80s, the Infocom text adventure games worked great with screen readers, at least on MS-DOS, as I understand it. I wasn't actually there. A little bit before my time. But now the iPhone application that Activision has put out,
7:43 p.m.
when you run it,
Page 44. LT of Infocom. LT of Infocom. Double tap to open.
in true game fashion, they've got the multimedia intro. Oh, is it going to do something different from?
Presenting. Enter nickname. Insertion point of star.
I did this last night, and I thought it wasn't going to make me do that again. Okay, let's see. So, okay, so parts of, it appears that at least this part of the application is accessible, but I'm going to show you that as soon as I get past this part here, I'm going to be blocked.
W. K. K. T. T. T.
Yes, a touchscreen keyboard reduces me to hunt and peck typing.
Text field. Is editing. Map. Q. Text field. Is edit. Return. Return.
Sorry, I
Alert.
thought I had adequately prepared
This nickname is
last
already
night.
used by okay. Button.
Okay, and it's going to give me suggestions, and I'm just going to accept one.
Nickname. Enter nickname. Text suggestions. Number sign in 4T7.9. Mod 77.16. Mod 7T plus 4.
Oh, what the heck? I'm not actually going to use this thing. But now, check this out. So we've got our fancy schmancy intro screen, but if I try to move through it with the screen reader swiping commands, all I get is voiceover cannot find anything on the screen. And I assume that there's some kind of start button or on there somewhere. I don't know.
There's something on the screen.
There must be, or else nobody would be able to use the app.
LT of infocom. LT of
Oh,
infocom.
you're in.
Closing LT of infocom.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I was through with the demo. So my point being that if you implement a custom interface and you do it from scratch and you don't implement the platform's accessibility API, we get nothing. Oh, and I have a similar demo for the PC. So one of my friends wanted an SFTP client so he could upload files by just putting them in a folder like he would with Dropbox. And
System access is ready. Mac open.
there's a program called Expand Drive that's supposed to do this.
Excellent drive. Desktop app. 1.
But when I bring it up with a screen reader
5.4.5. Mac.
and nothing, and I'm going to use a command to read the window,
Excellent drive V5.4.5.
nothing. But as you can see, there is stuff there on the screen.
Shutting
Now,
down system access.
in their case, shut up, Windows. In their case, I looked inside the app a bit and discovered what they were doing. Their main UI is using it's HTML and JavaScript using the Chromium embedded framework, but they're using version 1 of that framework, which for whatever reason didn't bring over Chromium's accessibility support. So I emailed them about that. Next problem. Oh, wait. Oh, yeah, a little digression here. So in the early days of PC screen readers, Windows screen readers, and also on classic Mac OS, so pre-OS 10, we had a really ugly hack for dealing with custom interfaces that didn't implement an accessibility API. And actually, on Windows, this was widely used, I would say, up until, I don't know, about 5 years ago. So the way that we would do it is we would intercept graphics functions such as draw text or so on Windows, we would intercept functions in the graphics device interface, or GDI, such as text out, draw text, transferring transferring from an in-memory bitmap to the screen itself. And we would keep track of everything that was going on and build what we called an off-screen model of what was being drawn to the screen. So that for things like back in the 90s, before Microsoft Word got the Visual Basic for Applications object model, we could keep track of everything that was going on in the main edit control and read it. And then if as the user arrowed through, the screen reader would keep track of where the cursor was by looking for a blinking vertical line. And so we could read what was on the screen, and using that technique for the main edit control in Microsoft Word was a bit before I got into this business, because by the time I started writing my screen reader in 2004, we had the Visual Basic for Applications object model. But the application that really pushed my own off-screen model implementation around that time was Skype, because now Skype implements the accessibility APIs like it was supposed to. But back in 2005, they did crazy things like, their contacts list was a custom control that for the current highlighted item, it wouldn't just use a solid background color for the highlight. It used like a gradient or something. So I had to be able to detect that. But now we can't do that anymore because, of course, graphics APIs have moved beyond GDI or the equivalent or Quick Draw back on classic Mac OS. So we now basically depend on people to implement the accessibility APIs. But we used to be able to hack around that to some extent. Next problem, this is a big one, unlabeled graphics. So if your application has a button in it that's a graphic and you don't provide a label through either the accessibility API directly or whatever mechanism your platform's standard GUI toolkit might offer, then we can't use it. Now on the web, we can look at, for example, the SRC attribute on the image tag, and we can kind of deduce something from that in many cases. But in native applications, we got nothing. I believe this is another iPhone demo. This is an application that I wanted to use and was frustrated by the unlabeled buttons. So this is an application for singing karaoke and recording your performance and sharing it with people online. And is it not going to use the Bluetooth speaker? Oh, well. Where are we? This is even worse than what I intended to demo. Okay, so this is back to the first problem where apparently they're doing something completely custom and we've got nothing. Let me just look at what's on the screen because I might be able to tell since I can kind of read it up close. Let's see what happens.
VoiceOver on.
Okay, now I think.
VoiceOver on.
Sync with party diagram. Heading level 2.
Oops.
Joining with Jessica. Diagram. Sync with party diagram. Hashtag sync with part.
I must have like activated the ad instead of closing it. Okay, this is what I intended to demo. These tabs along the bottom are unlabeled.
Tab 2 of 5. Selected. Tab 3 of 5.
Whatever that is.
Tab 4 of 5. Tab 5 of 5.
Yeah.
It's the fourth tab.
Okay.
That's the one I wanted.
So yeah, label your graphics.
Double tap open.
Next problem. If you, well, it might be better if I just go straight to demo and then I can explain what it is. So back to the application I was just in.
Sync.
Come on.
Selected. Tab 3 of 5.
Oh, and we've got the ad again. At least we know it's short.
Or we can all sing together. It's up to you.
Yes, if I can get to your song in the app. How are we doing on time?
We're good.
Okay, so
Tab. 4 5.
on this fourth tab,
Verizon Network. Status bar button.
okay, so we've got more unlabeled things here, but
Button. Activity. Invites.
okay, so these things here,
Activity.
activity
Invites.
and invites, I figured out by trial and error that they're like sub-tabs within the tab, and you can select one of those and it will change the rest of what's on the screen. But they're not implemented using a tab or tab-like control, and they don't expose the right so I gather that they're probably just using standard label controls and changing the color of one of those labels to indicate what, or the background color, I don't know, to indicate which one is selected. Whereas what they should do on iOS, I think, is they should either use a UI segment control, which is kind of like tabs in that one of them can be selected, or they should mimic it by setting the right properties in the accessibility API. And where this would apply in a web application is if you use just like a div element to implement a button or a tab or something that you can click to select, and you don't add the right ARIA attributes such as role or any of the properties such as ARIA checked or something like that to tell us what it is and what state it's in. And in fact, I've got a web demo. So I'm going to bring up my screen reader again.
System access is ready. Activity. Menu open. HTTP.
And
1 second code quiz link.
I saw this on on Hacker News the other day. And it's a quiz where you try to guess how many iterations of a loop each piece of code can execute in 1 second. But
Desktop is audio tab, group 1 tab. Do you know how much your computer can do this? Sub.c, heading level 3.
okay, so I pressed, and this was something that I forgot to go into earlier, but screen readers, particularly on Windows, tend to have their own keyboard commands for quickly navigating through the page. So for instance, I can jump through headings. It's kind of our equivalent of skimming. So I skipped to a heading, and now I'm going to down arrow and find out what's here.
Heading level 3, 1, 10, 100, 1000.
What are these?
10,000.
I assume that they're button-like.
100,000.
Yeah.
1 million. 10 million. 100 billion.
And I don't know, I'm just going to guess 100 million. So I can hit enter, and my screen reader will simulate a click on this thing.
Task switcher list.
Or it should have.
The
1 second code. Do you know how much? 10 billion.
Let's see.
100 guess number.
Let me just scroll down a little bit.
100 billion.
And now,
Score 1 remaining. 17 about this game.
right.
Score 1
Now.
remaining. Link, but remember you.
Okay, so first it threw me all the way down there because that was the first thing that we found changed on the web page after I simulated that click. So now let me try to get back to where I was.
Do you know how much your computer?
Oh, okay, I wasn't that far away. So, but now the other problem is,
Heading level 3. UNREA.
okay, that's a bug on my end.
1, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, 1 million, 10 million, 100 billion,
It also doesn't tell me that that's the one I selected.
1 million.
Nor does it tell me that that is the one that they indicated as the correct answer. I know that it is because I can see it if I look at it.
Exact
Or-
answer 500. Guess exact answer 500.
So use
Shutting down.
relevant ARIA properties to tell us what these things are and what's going on. I'll get back to more practical recommendations later. Okay, a web-specific problem are the sort of pseudo pop-ups where it doesn't actually open a pop-up window because everybody's blocking those now, but it dims the rest of the page and opens something that looks like a pop-up or a modal dialog. And the thing that causes problems with those, if they're not implemented correctly, is that it will dim the rest of the page, but the screen reader won't know that the rest of the page is not supposed to be interacted with. So another demo from a site that my boss came across that caused this problem for him.
System access is ready. Magnified. HTTP heading. HTTP. Campbell out of step. Previous slide. Moffy.com link.
So
Moffy.com tag group 2 tag.
come on.
Power cancel. Made for wireless step.
Now you can see that it dimmed out the rest of the page and did this new around here pop-up where you can subscribe to their mailing list or whatever.
4.8 out of 5 stars. 3 6.
But
$39 and whether you are out.
with my screen reader, I'm still interacting with the rest of the page.
Add accessory save. Refer friend. Keep your wireless. Board. USB shot. Board. Priority. Board. Hideout. Board. Compact top. Board. Ready with it.
Now, if I knew where the end key was on my laptop keyboard,
Compatible with. Board. Power the on.
but the point is that I would not find, with the screen reader, I would not find the contents of the pop-up unless I went all the way to the bottom of the page, because the element for the pop-up was added to the end of the DOM. And so in our, or any screen reader's rendering of the page, it ends up at the bottom of our sort of linear representation of it. So I will touch on how to do this right later on. Okay, so I don't have a demo for this one. I'm just going to talk about it briefly. If a web application defines its own keyboard commands, they can conflict with the keyboard commands defined by the screen reader. For instance, in a slideshow presentation, you can use the left, right, up and down arrow keys to move through the slides, but the screen reader co-opts those keyboard commands for moving our virtual cursor through the page. And you'll notice that I don't come back to this one in the practical recommendations section because there isn't really a good solution for that one yet. The RAS standard for accessible web applications, one of the roles or types of UI element that they define is application. And if you put role equals application on the HTML or body tag, then that basically tells the screen reader to shut off our virtual cursor and just get out of the way and let the application have all keyboard commands. But you don't really want to do that unless your application is prepared to be fully navigable with the keyboard, and including being able to read all text on the page just in the course of navigating with the keyboard. So, but a lot of applications apparently abuse this because the developers figure, well, this is an application, so I'll put role equals application on it, even though I don't really know what that means.
It makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so enough griping about what's wrong. What can developers do to do it right? Every time I read about somebody's new GUI toolkit, I sigh because I know that they probably didn't implement accessibility. So if you can help it, don't roll your own. In fact, use your platform's standard native controls as much as you can, because the platform developers have already done it right. Now, if you're developing a cross-platform application, you will probably want to use a cross-platform toolkit so you don't have to code it separately for Windows, Mac, Linux, etc. And some of these toolkits are accessible. So the two best, so in desktop land, The two best cross-platform toolkits for accessibility are two of the less frequently used ones, unfortunately. SWT for Java. If you're familiar with Eclipse, the IDE, they did their own cross-platform toolkit, and what they did is so they basically wrote wrappers around each of the platform's native controls, and then they also implemented each of the platform's accessibility APIs for the things where they had to do a custom control, such as their styled text control for the editor. So SWT basically is fully accessible on all the major platforms. But if you're not writing in Java, then you probably can't use it. There is a C++ toolkit called WX Widgets, which has bindings for a bunch of other languages, Python, Ruby, .NET, I think, a handful of others. And WX Widgets takes the same approach of using each platform's native controls. What they did not do, that SWT did, was also implement all the provide a wrapper over the platform's accessibility APIs to be used in custom controls such as a styled text editor or their own HTML viewer. So you can use WX widgets with caveats. I have blind developer friends that have successfully used WX widgets in their own applications. But you have to do stuff like, that they have two different list view controls, and one of them is accessible on Windows and the other one is accessible on Mac and Linux. But you can't just use one. Yeah, you can't just use one of them and be covered on all platforms. So WX widgets works kind of. Qt is okay on Windows, Mac, and Linux, and not accessible at all last time I checked on the mobile platforms. Speaking of mobile, React Native is fairly accessible, I think. Facebook is using it, so they if it's not accessible, then we expect them to fix it. Xamarin Forms, the .NET toolkit. Well, Xamarin Forms uses each platform's native controls, so it is de facto at least kind of accessible. And of course, anything based on a web view on HTML and JavaScript, such as Cordova or anything like that, will be as accessible as your HTML and JavaScript is. So that's an overview of the situation with cross-platform UI toolkits. Yeah, label all of your graphics that aren't just there for decoration. So like those buttons in the Sing app that I showed earlier. And on the web, that's just a matter of putting an alt attribute on your image tags or a title attribute. That'll work. Either of those will work. Or a title attribute on the containing thing like the link or the button. So that one's pretty straightforward. It just sucks that we still have to ask people to do it. And use the richest native control that's applicable. So again, in the thing that I was demoing in the Sing app, where there were those things that acted like tabs, but the screen reader didn't identify them as such, or the button-like thing, the radio button-like things for the various answers that I could select on the quiz. Now that one's interesting because those controls had not only a selected state, but a this is the correct answer state, which I assume was indicated by a different color. And we don't really have a standard way to indicate that in our accessibility APIs. So probably the well, I guess that one wasn't so bad because they then proceeded to say, well, the exact answer was 500 million, whatever it was. So, but to be able, we need to know what kinds of controls these things are and which one is selected where that's applicable. Right, so before you reach for ARIA in a web application, use standard HTML elements if applicable. So if you want to do a button, but you don't want it to look like the stock button, see if you can restyle it. If you can just use a standard button tag and restyle it with CSS before you go do your own div and then have to add an ARIA role to it, etc. Because if you do reach for ARIA, there are some extra things you have to do. So you have to make the control keyboard focusable by putting a tab index attribute on it. Tab index equals 0 should work. And for things that are more complicated than a button, you may need to implement some keyboard commands, such as up and down arrow to move through a list view. And just as when you're implementing a custom control, you want to mimic conventions for the visual look and feel. So as well for accessibility, you'll need to emulate what the browser is probably already doing for the equivalent standard control. And I understand that for a list view in particular, if you want to implement a rich list view that can show more than plain text for the individual items, you're probably going to have to go custom. It's better, of course, if you can find a library or a framework that already does it right. So you don't have, again, don't reinvent the wheel if you can help it. Modal dialogues. My friend Nolan, who does more web development than I do, he assures me that they are a pain to implement correctly. And you'll notice that I provided 2 links to articles about how to do it right. And the first one was classified as an advanced ARIA tip. So I asked Nolan if he could recommend a JavaScript library or framework that does everything right here so I could tell you just use this. And he said, man, I wish that existed. But the second one, the GitHub link, has an example of how to do at least most everything right. So you remember I showed you earlier that website where it popped up, but the screen reader was oblivious. Now I'll show you what it's like when they do it right.
Access is ready.
Yeah, I should really have put a title tag on that thing. Hey, the Reveal.js demo, minimal demo HTML template didn't have a title tag, so I blame them.
https://cross.github.io accessible mobile time. Cross.github.io tab group 3 tab.
All right, now
View the mobile window button.
I'm going to click that.
First name, editable text, rank.
And it puts my focus right where I need to be. And I'm just going to tab around here.
Last name, editable text.
Press the tab key to move through the page.
Email address, editable text, blank. Submit button. Cancel button. Close registration form button. Back to the spot. To change use. Press F6. First name, editable text, blank.
And I am locked into that modal dialog as I should be. So
Jump into the chat. To change use. Press F6. Close registration form button.
I should really move that press F6 thing to the end there so it doesn't slow me down.
View the mobile window button.
And the modal dialog went away, and it put my focus back to a different part of the page. So that's what it's like when they do it right. There is I've got ahead of myself a bit. And probably don't use the application role. Certainly don't use it just because you're developing an application. Only use that role on the HTML or body element if you really intend to tell the screen reader, get out of the way, I'll handle keyboard navigation all by myself. Here is a JavaScript library that can help you implement ARIA if you need to. Ally.js, the name is kind of a play on the A11Y abbreviation for accessibility. Just like internationalization, we have such clunky terminology that we need to abbreviate it by counting the letters. So ally.js.io can possibly help you implement ARIA. And test with a real screen reader. I've provided links on Windows 10. Microsoft's Narrator screen reader is getting pretty good. Most blind people don't use it as their main screen reader yet, but Microsoft wants us to eventually. And then my screen reader that I've developed for Saratech, we have a version called SA2Go that you can just go to the website, and if you're using Internet Explorer, it will walk you through the prompts to run it, and you can just run it straight from the website without having to install it first. We think that's pretty cool. Let me just show you that. So I've been running my regular installed copy for the demos, but let me show you this version. Okay, so there is no actual screen reader running right now. I'm just using JavaScript to play this audio here. And I'm going to hit enter. And it noted, so the server noticed that IE was downloading the file, and it told the JavaScript to play that Alt-R prompt. So I'm going to press Alt-R. And let's just pretend that I didn't already have this installed on my laptop. It's downloaded it, and any second now. Come on. It shouldn't take that long to extract it. Here we go.
System access to go. Log in. If you have a free SA2Go account.
And what we originally intended this is a bit of a digression, but what we originally intended this for back when we developed this in 2007 or so was for people using like public computers in a library or a school or whatever. They could walk up to the computer and they could blindly do the Windows R www.sa2go.com, press enter, and they could get the screen reader up and running even if all they had access to was a guest account with no admin rights, and start using the computer. So I'm going to log into my Saratech account here. Oh, and that's one of my other pet features right there, is if I have the screen reader's key echo turned on and I type in a password field, instead of doing something like lame, like saying star, 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 it plays the sound effect. So.
You're logged on. System access to go is ready. Magnification is off.
And that's it. And then when I shut down the screen reader,
shutting down system access,
that copy that was downloaded and unpacked into a temporary directory is removed and it's gone. Again, pretend that the same screen reader wasn't already installed on my laptop. You get the idea. So you can use that to test with a real screen reader on Windows. There's also an open source screen reader called NVDA for non-visual desktop access, and you can get that at nvaccess.org. On Mac, you can just press Command plus F5 to fire up VoiceOver, and it has a very good tutorial that you can go through to learn the commands and so forth. On iOS, you can tap 3 times. You can press the home button 3 times quickly, or triple click home, as we said. In fact, we used to have a podcast called Triple Click Home that was about iOS stuff for blind people. So there's the VoiceOver screen reader on iOS. TalkBack on Android. On some devices, you can do a triple click home type of thing to start that, but you can always find it in settings. And I didn't mention Linux because I ran out of room on the slide. But even once you've tested with a real screen reader, that's not going to give you a complete idea of what the experience is like for an actual user who uses this stuff day in and day out. So get feedback from real users. So that's about all I've got. I just want to emphasize here how important to emphasize how important it is to make your software accessible. I know a blind guy who almost lost his job several years ago because the client of the company that he was working for, they wanted him to use a particular application, and even though the application had a web interface that was accessible, they insisted that he use the high interactivity version, which was I think it was a Java applet. And the Java applet was completely inaccessible, and he almost lost his job over that. He only got to keep it because his employer found something else for him to do. But inaccessible software can really block people from getting stuff done, or pursuing their education, or even just participating in fun social network type stuff like that Sing application I showed you earlier. So make your software accessible if you can. That's all I got. So more questions? How are we doing on time? How did I go over?
We weren't really keeping track.
Okay.
That's fine.
Oh, Jacob, can you come
Yeah.
shut down the broadcast?
Yeah.
Oh, unless people have questions, because if we've got questions,
Well,
then
I have one kind of.
Yeah?
Like, if I wanted to get feedback from blind users on the application, like, is there a forum or an organization I can get, like, either pay someone or just ask for volunteers to, like, go to this page and tell me if it's awful or not?
That's a good question. For some platforms, there are communities that you can contact. For instance, on iOS, there's a website called applevis.com. That's a community of blind iOS users, and they've got forums and stuff there. Unfortunately, I can't rattle off any. I should know this, but well, on Windows for the NVDA screen reader, if you go to their website, I'm pretty sure that they have forums. Sorry, I can't give you a better answer for that one.
That's okay. I mean, it's what I've always thought. It's like I want someone who actually knows what they're talking about to tell me if it's good or not, rather than just making guesses. But I don't know.
What's your name again?
Tanner.
Okay. I don't think we've met.
I don't think we have.
Yeah, good question. All right. Anything else before we shut down the recording?
Yeah, I had a question for you. This is Sonic.
Okay.
Have you had any experience with using sonification or soundscapes with graphical user interfaces?
No, I haven't.
I'd be curious to see, because I've seen research where people have used sonification to relay visual information in the auditory domain. But they're usually they're either usually trying like really rich things like an actual scene, or they're trying to do a simple thing like just a picture of a cup. But I'd be curious, like I don't think I've seen any research where people have tried to use sonification.
But to give an overview of all of the elements on a screen and where they are in relation to it. Yeah, that
an actual image.
That
Maybe leveraging stereo audio to
Exactly.
Yeah, that could be interesting.
Because I mean, stereo audio and virtual surround sound has gotten really, really good.
Oh yeah, they've got. In fact, one of my friends is working on a C++ library for doing 3D audio, and he implemented his own head-related transfer functions for doing the actual 3D positioning. So he might be into that kind of thing.
Okay, I'll go ahead and stop the broadcast.